Good morning. Welcome to this circle. We're gathered here today as an affirming and inclusive community that gathers in many different ways, gathers to work together, to learn together, to eat together and play together, to heal life's hurts together and support society's most vulnerable together. We gather here as we gather each and every week to be this community and to welcome one another. No matter who you are, we welcome you. We attempt to create safer places by welcoming each other, no matter our age or our identity, our sexual orientation, our gender expressions. All of us are welcome in this circle. It's in gratitude and deep respect that we gather in this place, not only because this is our spiritual community, but also because we gather on this land, in this place, in this Treaty 6 territory, this land that has been the traditional meeting land for countless people through the generations. And whether this is our ancestral or our adopted homes, we are grateful for it. And we speak that gratitude and recognize the hurt that this land and our relationships have caused, and that we seek to do better, to live a spirit of reconciliation with all those who have come before and those who continue to build that relationship with us. And so today, as we gather to begin a time in April and May on our Sundays where we can ponder and explore the seeds that we plant with and for each other, the seeds of living good and positive lives together, the seeds that we plant that help us to live our highest values, to make a difference in our communities and in our world. And so today, as we gather to honor and celebrate all the ways that we plant patience with one another, we come to this place knowing that if we're in this circle, if we're a part of our community that gathers periodically or every week, in person or online, we belong. That this is a place of belonging, and our doors are always open wide. Let's gather in song this morning.
Maybe as we wait for spring, we know more than ever that life is a long conversation between impatience and persistence. We light this candle knowing the deep persistence of light to penetrate whatever darkness, the deep persistence of life to keep making its way even through frozen ground and the fallow season of winter, and the persistence of all beings for life, for relationship, for connection. As we center ourselves in this time, we want to speak a prayer together that has been said in many different variations and forms by 12-step recovery groups. And this is it, this prayer that we've come to know as the Serenity Prayer in a much more expanded form. A prayer we offer in our own search for patience and persistence, for the things we can change and the things that are well beyond our control. Together in our many voices, we speak our experience as we strengthen our intentions together. May we find the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Patience for the things that take time, appreciation for all that we have, and tolerance for those with different struggles, for freedom to live beyond the limitations of our past ways, the ability to feel love and to feel love for one another, and strength to get up and try again, even when we feel it's hopeless. May it be so.
Okay, everyone, it's our time for all ages. And I invite anyone who would like to come to the carpet to please make your way here. We'll make room for you. Good morning, everyone. I want to talk to you about waiting. Do you like waiting?
No, not
Some of you, yes, and some of you, no. Most of you, no? What don't you like about it? Yeah. Being patient, that's hard. Yeah. What do you think? Waiting for a birthday cake is very hard. Yes. Whoa, a field trip to Palm Springs. Wouldn't that be hard to wait for? What else is hard to wait for? Callum? Yeah, it's hard to wait for something exciting. Other things to say? Go ahead. Oh, to wait for a ride in a long lineup. That is really hard. Yeah. I don't like waiting in lines either. That's true. Yes. Well, Liam, waiting for the story is part of the fun. Is it ever fun to wait? No. Never? No. Let's try to think about a time that could be fun to wait for. Do you ever get this feeling? Do you ever get this feeling like you're thinking of something really good and you're like, whoo, you just kind of get this tingly feeling inside and you can't wait. And that's a really good feeling because it doesn't happen after the thing, right? It only happens before the thing. It's kind of a feeling that is only happens when you're waiting for something exciting. Now, waiting can also be very hard and challenging because we have to wait for yucky things too, like going to happen. Yeah, or bad weather and you don't want it to ruin your garden or wreck your newly washed windows or your freshly washed car, something like that. You know, you don't like that. But sometimes it can be waiting can be a really good time. And I want to read you a story about that. The waiting is over. It's called If You Want to See a Whale. Yeah, what? Yes, Robert? Oh, yes. Well, that's really interesting. These words are by Julie Fogliano, and pictures are by Aaron E. Stead. It's called If You Want to See a Whale. If you want to see a whale. Here we go. If you want to see a whale, you will need a window. And an ocean. And time for waiting. And time for looking. And time for wondering, is that a whale? Yes. Yes, you have to wonder that. And time for realizing, no, it's just a bird. If you want to see a whale, you will need a not-so-comfy chair and a not-too-cozy blanket, because sleeping eyes can't watch for whales, and whales won't wait for watching. If you want to see a whale, you'll have to just ignore the roses and all their pink and all their sweet and all their wild and all their waving, because roses don't want you watching whales. Or waiting for or wondering about things that are not pink and things that are not sweet or things that are not roses. If you want to see a whale, don't look way out and over there to the ship that is sailing with the flag that is flapping, because possible pirates won't help at all when you're waiting for a whale. If you want to see a whale, there's no time to watch the pelican, who may or may not be smiling while sitting, staring, looking out, because pelicans who sit and stare can never be a whale. If you want to see a whale, be careful not to notice something inching small and green across the leaf. Just nibble, scoot, because things that are smaller than most things can't be as giant as a whale. If you want to see a whale, you should watch the clouds, some floating by, some hanging down in the sky that's spread out side to side, or the certain sun that's shining, because if you start looking straight up, you might just miss a whale. I know, the cloud is trying to trick you. I know. But if you want to see a real whale, don't be looking up at the clouds. If you want to see a whale, keep both eyes on the sea. And wait. And wait. And wait.
And don't wait. Get out.
The book has no ending. It just says wait. Oh my goodness, I love that.
It's not a real whale.
Have you ever seen a whale?
Yes.
You have?
I saw 2 whales.
Oh my goodness, you are lucky. You must have waited and watched.
I've seen a humpback whale.
Wow,
I saw 2 humpback whales.
this is amazing. Wow, you all have so much to say today. This is fantastic. Waiting can be hard. It can also be. Do you want to?
This is a poem by, of course, none other than Mary Oliver. And it's called The Turtle. The turtle breaks from the blue-black skin of the water, dragging her shell with mossy scoots across the shallows and through the rushes and over the mud flats to the uprise, to the yellow sand, to dig with her ungainly feet a nest, and hunker there, spewing her white eggs down into the darkness. And you think of her patience, her fortitude, her determination to complete what she was born to do. And then you realize a greater thing. She doesn't consider what she was born to do. She's filled with an old blind wish. It isn't even hers, but it came to her in the rain or the soft wind, which is a gate through which her life keeps walking. She can't see herself apart from the rest of the world or the world from what she must do every spring. Crawling up the high hill, luminous under the sand that is packed against her skin. She doesn't dream. She knows she's part of the pond she lives in. The tall trees are her children. The birds that swim above her are tied to her by an unbreakable string. You think of her patience, her fortitude, her determination to complete what she was born to do. In the words of this poet,
as a wisdom teacher, Jesus told stories in the form of sometimes cryptic, but sometimes understandable parables, little tales that seem to point to a deeper sense of telling and wisdom. And one of those can be found in the 4th chapter of Mark, the very first gospel to be written and shared among early Christian communities. And here is that parable. Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky ground, where it did not have much soil, and it sprang up quickly, since it had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. and it yielded no grain. Still other seed fell into good soil and brought forth grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30 and 60 and 100-fold. And Jesus said, "Let anyone with ears listen." In this first century story parable, may we find wisdom for our living.
I want you to know that absolutely everything I know about planting could fit on a dime. And I still have to Google which way to plant a bulb, pointy part up or pointy part down. There's nothing logical or intuitive about it to me. And when I look at a seed, I want it to grow like this. Well, you get the idea. I can't even really wait for it to finish. I want all those germinating, rooting, shooting, blooming days to collapse into minutes. And that's because I'm even worse at patience than I am at planting. Mind you, I've seen a lot of patience in my life. My father was the most patient person I've ever known. He could easily wait for a gap in traffic to turn left, and he always believed that one's turn would come. You just have to wait for it. And he could persist in fixing anything that was broken, whether he got it the first time or whether it took many, many tries. He even had patience enough to wait for me to get past being a grunty teenager to be an adult you could actually stand to be with. But despite some of my improvements in disposition and character from my teenage years, I'm still one of those statistics when it comes to impatience. You know what I mean. If it takes too long for my computer to boot up, I walk away and do something else. If it takes too long to download something, I give up on it. If I have to wait too long to turn left, I turn right and go around the block. And if someone is speaking and I think I know how it's going to end, I find it really hard not to jump in and finish the sentence. So that ancient story about planting seeds is a helpful one for me to hear. And it's one of those stories, like so many good stories, that depending on how you hold it up to the light, you see different things in it. Sometimes when I've held it up to the light, what I mostly see is a guy that doesn't know anything more about planting than I do. You know, he's just wasting good seed. Even I know you have to pay some attention to where you plant and how you plant. And the story doesn't say anything about there being any soil tests to determine the salt or mineral content of the earth, and no attention's given to the grading of the field or the drainage, and no consideration as to what season would be best for planting, no reference to tilling the ground to loosen the grip of the weeds, no effort to rake up the soil so that the seed has a chance to catch and hold, no intention to scatter the seed evenly, just willy-nilly, broadcasting everywhere and anywhere. And other times, when I've held this story up to the light, I've seen something different in it. I've seen a generous, trusting, extravagant sower who doesn't waste any energy obsessing about the weather or the state of the soil. She can broadcast seed indiscriminately because there's enough for the rockiest soil, and there's enough to feed the birds, and there's enough to even share it with the weeds. There's no hint of scarcity. There's just abundance and generosity. And now when I hold that story up to the light, I can see in it a character who plants patiently, knowing that some of what we do comes to nothing. Some of our efforts fail completely. Some of the things we do, it's for the birds. And that story and our story doesn't end there. Just like in the natural world, whatever we make of our lives, all is not wasted. We're always more than the worst thing we ever did. We're always more than the best thing we failed to do. No matter who we are or what we've done or what we failed to do, we are making something of our lives. And some of what we do doesn't yield the result we hope for. And some of the results we'll never see. Some of the seeds we plant will just not germinate. But what I find compelling in this story is this sower just keeps at it. Just keeps trying. Doesn't do what I would do and give up farming and take up fishing instead. He doesn't stop because he doesn't get it right the first time. She has the patience and the persistence to keep planting in all kinds of different conditions until something works. And in the story, even though only 25% of the seed germinates, there's something stunningly productive and beautiful. I'm learning a first principle about patience. It begins at home. It begins with ourselves. In the world of the story, we see a character who is patient with himself, patient with her efforts and her attempts, his experiments and his failures, with things not working out or things not happening through no fault of his own, because they are conditions over which he had no control. Had no control over the rockiness of the soil or the strength of the sun or where the birds choose to feed. Holding this story up like a prism catching light, there are many ways to see this one who plants. And beyond being careless or extravagant, there is a model of patience. A response that's grounded in an acceptance that there's so much in life over which we have absolutely no control. And there are so many instructors in patience. The patience of trees waiting for enough sun and enough moisture to birth their leaves again. The patience of salmon swimming upstream, hurling themselves up the falls, determined to return to the spawning ground of their birth and their death. Birds building a nest, twig by tedious twig, or bamboo, silently and invisibly supporting the life that will come by putting so much energy into its roots. Or the patience of a beaver, struggling with each load of mud it manages to carry to build its home. Or the patience of that turtle, crossing the sand, climbing the dune, determined to complete what she was born to do, without necessarily knowing the outcome of any of those eggs she would lay in the sand. Those acts of patience, along with her sister, persistence. One of the many lessons this subversive little story teaches us is about planting our lives with patience and persistence in whatever soil. Somehow knowing that to cultivate love and beauty, to cultivate hope and possibility, to cultivate truth and goodness, always comes to something. That those seeds are never wasted. It doesn't really matter what they yield or when they yield. What matters is that they are planted. As we consider our living, in the light of this story, which has so many things to teach, and in light of the wisdom of the turtle faithfully doing what she must do, we take this time where we hold a bit of silence with each other to consider where life is inviting us to plant with patience and persistence, to consider if we don't give up something, anything can happen.
Once a month, we also have the opportunity to hear about how the impact of our giving goes outside of our walls to the broader work of the United Church of Canada through the Mission and Service Fund, and we thank Gail for bringing us updates and some news about how that helps.
On December 10th, 2017, Beatrice Finn of Sweden and Canadian Setsuko Thurlow, who at age 13 survived the bombing of Hiroshima, accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. In her acceptance speech on behalf of the organization, Finn stated, "In missile sites buried in our earth, on submarines navigating through our oceans, and aboard planes flying high in our sky, lie 15,000 objects of humankind destruction. We represent those who refuse to accept nuclear weapons as a fixture in our world, those who refuse to have their fates bound up in a few lines of launch code." She spoke of three things: fear, freedom, and the future. She believes that proponents of nuclear weapons are celebrating fear as a weapon of war. And she believes we must reclaim the freedom to not live our lives as hostages to imminent annihilation. In speaking of the future, she celebrated that through the action of ordinary people in 2017, the hypothetical marched forward towards the actual, as 122 nations negotiated and concluded a UN treaty to outlaw these weapons of mass destruction. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons provides a pathway forward at a moment of great global crisis. It is a light in a dark time, and more than that, it provides a choice. By the way, Canada was not one of those signatories to that treaty. For her full speech, you can check the Project Ploughshares website. Project Ploughshares is a division of the Canadian Council of Churches that works with churches, governments, other organizations, and individuals to advance policies and actions to prevent war and armed violence. Since the United Church is a member of the Canadian Council of Churches, through our Mission and Service Fund, we too are part of the anti-war, anti-armaments movement.
We gather at this spacious table not to speak any magic words or to invoke any supernatural power, but to call ourselves into the collective energy of being spiritual community that encourages each other to persist in seeking justice, in loving kindness, in walking humbly on this good earth. If we don't give up,
transformation can happen. And so at this table, we share a little bit of bread. Its journey from seed to grain, from field to mill, a journey of persistence in the midst of sun and rain so that it can satisfy our hunger. So sharing bread, we can remember, if we don't give up,
transformation can happen. And we share juice that comes from grapes that were crushed from the familiar form on which they grew on the vine. A journey of persistence in the midst of sun and rain to satisfy our thirst. Sharing juice, we remember if we don't give up,
transformation can happen. This ritual that we are invited to is not an expression of any creed. You're welcome to participate whether or not you're a member of this or any spiritual community. We invite you to share in this ritual as a way of strengthening our collective intentions to not be daunted by the enormity of the world's problems or the world's grief, but to persist in doing justice and loving mercy and walking humbly together. This bread we share might represent for us the bread of patience, and this cup might represent the cup of persistence. We are not alone, nor do we believe that we shall allow anyone to be alone. We share these symbols as an expression of our capacity together.
We go in the already and the not yet. We go in the gift of light to plant our seeds with patience, with perseverance. We go together in the strength of those who keep one another accountable, to hold on, to not give up. We go together.
Hey, it's Christopher. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch last week's video, click this button right here. If you can manage it and can donate to SSUC to help us continue this video page, click right here. And for any information that you want about SSUC and our programs, visit our website, right?